From the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight as we continue to break down the latest with the Broncos head coaching search. And Benjamin, this conversation over the last several days has taken some very unique twists and turns. We started out, I think, this whole process thinking the Broncos are likely looking for experience. They're going to want to, because most of the time it's the opposite of what you previously did, right? You go 3 straight hires of first-time head coaches. Mm-hmm. It makes sense at this point the Broncos are going to be looking for experience, looking for somebody that's done this before, especially at the NFL level. But the Broncos, of course, through the midst of their coaching search, they do have a few candidates in here that don't have that. David Shaw has only got the college head coaching experience. He doesn't have pro football head coaching experience. Ejiro Evero, of course, the Broncos defensive coordinator last year, and also D'Amico Ryans, the 49ers defensive coordinator. So through this process, should we be considering the fact that the Broncos, maybe while they're looking for that experience, actually find one of these candidates to be appealing?
I mean, you can start off looking for something and wind up figuring out that you actually wanted something else. It's entirely possible to go mining for silver and find gold, you know? And so I think that's part of the thing. I do think D'Amico Ryans has a real shot here in Denver. I really do. I think that, based on the way this coaching search has played out, I do believe that Jim Harbaugh was their top target. I do. With him going back to Michigan, they kind of shifted focus a little bit to, kind of favoring Sean Payton and Dan Quinn. But reality is when you start going through these processes, you find out about people, things you like, things you don't like, and maybe somebody else sells themselves on the job. And I think for better or worse, D'Amico Ryans has certainly made a great case for himself. I think that he's well positioned once they're able to interview again, to interview and see if he can seal the deal on getting the next head coaching job with the Denver Broncos.
And simultaneously, because we just experienced this last year, how much weight do you really put on the interview process anyways, right? Because Nathaniel Hackett blew away the interview process with his presentation. And that doesn't mean that I still think under the right circumstances, there could have been more opportunity for Nathaniel Hackett. Maybe if he wasn't the play caller, maybe if they had given him a quarterback that didn't struggle as much in the first year, or maybe more developmental. But the point being here is I think a lot of Broncos fans are going to be like, okay, well, don't put too much on the interview process because that's what problems sort of happened last year.
Well, I think it's about resume, body of work, plan. I think the interview process this time is a little bit different because you basically have a corporate boardroom in there interviewing rather than a bunch of football types. So I think the interview process is different, and maybe those guys have an edge at the interview process itself, where the football guys will have an edge in the football process. So maybe marrying those two up, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe getting that kind of experience helps out a little bit. I don't think you solely want to base it on an interview. I mean, who solely bases anything on an interview anymore? Any job you've ever come to, you've had to provide references and resumes and certifications and all that kind of stuff. References is a little bit, but you get the idea. So I think that a combination of that helps. I mean, D'Amico Ryans is a guy who people said he was going to be a head coach when he was a player.
That's right.
And he was a guy that wore the green dot all the time. He was defensively coaching a lot of those guys on the field as a player. And now he's turned around and taken Robert Saleh's defense and made it ostensibly better. His defensive philosophy is a little bit different than what we've seen the last, 6 years here in Denver, 5 years here in Denver, give or take. It's a middle of the field closed defense, mostly a cover 3 type. It's 4 down linemen, a lot closer to what, for instance, Dan Quinn used to run than what we've been running with Vic Fangio. Maybe that's the direction that the league swings back to. Right now, everybody's kind of switched over to 2 deep man under or cover 4, cover 6 type defenses. So maybe they're getting out in front of the pendulum that way as it swings back to middle of the field closed. I don't know, but there would be some changes along that defense. It'd be interesting to see where everybody lines up, kind of, if he were the guy, where everybody lines up, especially in that front 7.
Well, and the reason I bring up kind of the interview process is especially for some of these. Well, these 3 candidates specifically that don't have head coaching experience at the pro level, you're relying on some of those other factors, right? You're relying on what you've seen when they're calling plays, for example, as a defensive coordinator. But the fact is they may not be necessarily calling plays here as a DC. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But the point here is you have to rely on all of those factors, but you don't get to look at their head coaching experience like Dan Quinn or Sean Payton or Jim Harbaugh. Like with those guys, it's a very clear, evident, this is how they did it. The thing about Nathaniel Hackett, for example, is he's going to tell you how he wants to do it. But those are the examples of where you actually see how it played out and maybe what they learned from it. You don't get that with these other guys. So for me, it's like, how do you gain that information in that interview so that you feel confident that they are the CEO type that you're looking for?
I think you just ask them questions and situations and see how they respond. I mean, it's a projection, similar to the way you're looking at, do I want a free agent here or a draft pick as a quarterback? I know what this free agent can do. I've seen the resume on him. I know what it is that he can do. This draft pick, boy, he might be something special. I don't know. So I think it's that. It's the same balance, the same war that you're up against in those kinds of decisions. Do I want the free agent or the draft pick? Because the draft pick's younger, but he's an unknown. Whereas so with a coach with experience,
Bucks,
I mean, but I mean, don't get me wrong. I prefer coaches with experience. I've been absolutely adamant about that. I do. Does that mean that I'm against DeMeco Ryans? No, it just means I have a particular preference. I do believe that you have to grow a coach. I do believe they're going to make mistakes, but I also believe that the Denver Broncos have an opportunity here to, if DeMeco is the hire, to kind of sand things down a little bit and rebuild the culture in a kind of a different way and wash away some of this continuity stuff that they've had that's led to losing seasons. I think it'll be an opportunity to grow a little bit. There won't be as much pressure right off the bat in year one. And hopefully that will help. Hopefully the fan base would have patience if he were the hire.
So, by the way, the reason I'm including David Shaw in this conversation is because, and you and I have discussed this quite a bit of time, coaching at the college level versus coaching at the pro level is so different. And David Shaw has experience as a coordinator and as a position coach, but at the NFL level, but he doesn't have the head coaching experience there and what he'd be tasked to do. And we see this so often when coaches from college try to make the jump to pro, it doesn't always translate. Mm-hmm. So that's why it is a bit starting from scratch with David Shaw if you're having a conversation about what kind of head coach are you going to be. But back to DeMeco Ryans here for a second. I mean, you said it. I mean, since he got into the league, the conversation has been about not if, it's when he will have an opportunity to be a head coach. And what he did with Robert Saleh's defense over the last couple of years as a DC is only reaffirmed that as players, coaches, everybody wants to work with him. And by the way, what's probably the most successful coaching tree out there? Kyle Shanahan's tree is all of a sudden becoming one of the most successful coaching trees. We're seeing Mike McDaniel out there with the Dolphins. You mentioned Robert Saleh. Both are up and coming coaches, right? That staff gets picked apart, much like the LA Rams staff. And again, it's all kind of still the Shanahan tree. But those staffs are the ones that gets picked apart the most. And guess what? Those are the ones that are continuing to find success, whether offense or defense.
Yeah, and I think
there's a reason for that too.
There is, and that's because you get trained up on both sides of the ball.
Right.
I think when Kyle Shanahan insists that you understand both sides of the ball, and there's value to that, and so I think that's inherently valuable as far as this stuff goes. Now, speculating, but DeMeco Ryans does appear to be somebody they very much have their eyes on here, and as the main candidate, I think, with no experience.
Some competition, though.
There is. That's the other thing. Is just because Denver may be interested doesn't mean that 100% he's coming to Denver. I mean, obviously, the Houston Texans are having him back want him back for another interview. They have their sights kind of set on him or John Gannon. And, DeMeco used to play for Houston.
That's right.
So there's a tie there. With Houston, I think there's some appeal because that job has a lot of draft picks. You're not tied to any quarterback. There's a lot of salary cap malleability. You can build that thing from the ground up the way you want it to. With Denver, you kind of have a defense that's already more or less built. You're going to have to make some changes to some things in order to get things the way you want them. But, the offense, you're tied to the quarterback. You've got a little bit you need to do on the offensive line, but you're not going to have much of a hand in shaping this the way you want it, at least not year one.
But that's a good point. Year one, especially, it's going to be taking what you have and understanding that the ownership is going to have to give you a little bit of time. That's for sure. But I guess it also depends on kind of what you're looking for, right? Because if you want to sort of get your feet wet, you get into an organization like the Houston Texans, and you're going to have a really young roster. You're going to be building that thing from the ground up, and you can be part of that and understand that it could take a little bit of time. Or you step into this role where you're thinking about, okay, if we can make the right tweaks, this team already has a lot of pieces in place to actually compete right now. And what do you want to be a part of? Do you want to be a part of the slow build, or do you want to be part of a team that really just needs the right motivation and the right coaching? Because we saw towards the end of the year where this team played complementary football, where we saw that the offense finally put together some things. And it showed us, I think it showed everybody, that coaching really does matter. Not that we had ever question about that, but coaching matters, and coaching can be the difference between a roster that looks listless and lost at times to being a team that's saying, no, actually, they can represent and they can compete.
Yeah, I think a lot of this depends on the staff too. D'Amico Ryan's got to sell you on a staff. Is it going to be you got to bring in a veteran, grizzled old offensive coordinator that's got that's had his hands in the league a long time and has a lot of experience, maybe been to a Super Bowl, or are you going to have what is that staff and what is that offense going to look like? As you're going to have to cater to Russ for at least a year. At least a year, right? And so,
by the way, I think that's a conversation that's probably happening with all these candidates. It's an if and when kind of thing, right? So hey. Let's come in. Let's try to get the most we can out of Russell Wilson. You and I don't believe he's washed. I don't think any of these candidates coming in, if they are interested in the Broncos, think that Russell Wilson is washed. Okay, so we're all kind of on the same page with that. But there also has to be an understanding of, okay, but what if we were wrong about that? What if for some reason that he is never able to rekindle? Again, like he forgot how to play football, but ever able to rekindle what he was? Well, then what is our plan? What is the strategy out of that? Because you can't be a serious contender for this job if you think your entire performance is based on what happens with Russell Wilson. There has to be an understanding that we have to have another opportunity, a quarterback at some point.
Well, yeah, and I think that's part of the reason that having certain draft picks would be valuable. I think this year is the year to trade back, amass in the middle rounds, and try to get future picks.
Which is George Payton's philosophy.
And be ready for next year to be able to make a move if you need to. And I think every candidate kind of had that plan but one, because he obviously couldn't have that plan because draft picks would be traded for him. So, and I don't think, I'll just coach up whoever we have is a good enough plan.
It's not. No, it's not. You got to have another plan. And organizationally, I think this year is a big learning year for everybody. Mm-hmm. The ownership getting here when they did, I think there was a lot of early celebration from everybody. Hey, boy, we made this blockbuster move with Russell Wilson. Guess what? We're on the right trend with getting an offensive-minded head coach, and that we're going to have young, fresh ideas here in the building. I get it. I got swept up in a little bit. I'm sure everybody got it. Well, maybe not you, but some people got swept up in the midst of it. But the point of it here is that you tried to go with those trends. You tried to bring and instill that kind of energy in the building, and unfortunately it didn't work. So you had to learn from that. And if nothing else, maybe the lesson you learned from that is that you got to have other contingencies. You got to have other backup sort of situations in mind.
And then looking back on that trade now, how much more of a disaster could it be if George Payton hadn't put his foot down and said, no, I'm not trading Quinn Meinerz. You can have Shelby Harris instead.
Significant. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, that right there. Perfect example, right? You're talking about of the things that need to happen this offseason, which the offensive line is one of the top ones, right? We talk about just culture and coaching and all those things, but the offensive line needs some serious attention. Can you imagine having this conversation without one of your best offensive linemen on this roster right now?
I'm just saying. Much as we all love Shelby, and I'm wishing him nothing but success in Seattle. For the Broncos, the better move was keeping Quinn.
Yeah. Quinn Meinerz is significant, and he is going to be, again, for an offensive line that didn't perform to the level that they needed to last year. I think that's going to be one of those things where you're saying, okay, we have Quinn Meinerz. We got Garrett Bowles on the left side. Let's go ahead and start figuring out what the rest of it is because, of course, Dalton Reisner is a free agent. The center position, maybe it's Graham Glasgow, maybe it's Lloyd Cushenberry. A massive hole there on the right tackle position. You maybe need the first rounder, or maybe you can trade back. You can acquire picks and at least position yourself into the future. And I think whatever coaching, again, coming back to this conversation, whatever coaching candidate you bring in, it's about that. It's about how are we positioned beyond this year? Let's do what we can this year to put this team back in contention because you got to build up a culture around this building that they believe they can win games again. You have to do it.
It has to be.
That's why I don't think it has to always be a coach with experience. And again, I know we said that would be very valuable. I'm not saying it wouldn't. I'm not saying that
most of their search had that, but they turned over enough rocks looking for silver, and maybe they found gold.
Look at you trying to bring it all the way back around. It's amazing. Symmetry. What is this? Synergy, symmetry, all those things. All right, for Benjamin Allbright, I'm Ryan Edwards. Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight.
Denver's going to win it! You can stand up and salute in Denver, and you got the world champions that live in your town.